Good evening, all. How's everybody doing? Thank you so much for tuning in this evening for this really important topic, discussing mosaic embryos and when to transfer, when not to transfer. I'm your host this evening, Jessica Bourke, aka the Fertility Detective, and I'm being joined by Dr. Hans Arce, who's based at Institut Marquès in Barcelona. And I know that this is going to be a great conversation. I've obviously spoken with yourself, Hans, before, so I know you know the ins and outs of so many topics, and I'm really looking forward to this. So before we dive in, do you want to maybe give some background to your work and your level of involvement in this field, and obviously your time now moving over to Spain in recent months?
Well, I'm a gynecologist by trade. I've been doing fertility medicine for, I don't know, over 15 years, 16 years. Around 12 of those years exclusively fertility medicine. I studied in Peru. My medical degree, I went to Barcelona, where I trained obs and gynae, did fertility, then moved to Ireland, where we met Jessica. Lived there for 8.5 years, and I did a lot of management back then. And I came back to Barcelona, where I'm a fertility consultant, but I'm also the medical director of Western Europe
Oh,
for
brilliant.
future. Yeah, but
Amazing.
Full-time fertility doctor and some
Yes.
management. Yes.
And many years behind you, which is, of course, so important because that's what people need. They need that level of expertise and understanding of their case and the information so they can make informed decisions. So with this topic this evening, I think we should probably take a little step back first, just to give some context to people. Because when we're talking about mosaic embryos, we have to first understand, how do we even discover mosaic embryos and what the difference is between them and a euploid embryo or aneuploid. So let's maybe start there just to give people some context.
Okay, so all cells in our body should have 46 chromosomes. Okay, chromosomes are, if I compare the gene pool to a library, chromosomes are the bookshelves.
Yes.
The genes are the pages inside the books. Okay, so we have 46 bookshelves in our library of genes called chromosomes, but what they really are is 23 pairs, because we inherit 23 pairs, 23 chromosomes from our dad and 23 chromosomes from our mom. So that's why we have 23 pairs of chromosomes. Like 2 of those chromosomes are the forms of X's. You're a girl. If one of them's a Y, you're a boy. Okay. So what happens when fertility drops with age? What happens is that mainly more of the eggs that are ovulated or obtained through treatment will not have those 23 chromosomes. They will either have an extra chromosome or less chromosome. So that when the 23 chromosome sperm comes, we end up with an embryo that instead of having 46 chromosomes, it could either have 45 or 47. Those are what we call aneuploid embryos, and those arise from a problem in the division of mainly the eggs in 10% of the cases from the sperm. So the problem comes from the gamete, the egg or the sperm. So that when all this fertilized egg starts multiplying, every cell coming from that cell will have an abnormal number of chromosomes, because the original cell, the fertilized egg, had an abnormal number of chromosomes. Now, what can happen is that you might have an embryo formed from a normal egg and a normal sperm. Hence, you have an embryo with 46 chromosomes, and in its first division, in the first day, it turns into 2 cells with 46 chromosomes each. Everything's going great. On the second day, each of these cells divides again. So on the second day, we have 4 identical cells, each with its 46 chromosomes. Now imagine that from day 2 to day 3, one of those cells, instead of dividing into 2 cells with 46 chromosomes, you end up with an error. And then each time that abnormal cell divides, it will produce abnormal cells, while the other 7 cells that had all their 46 chromosomes keep on dividing and form healthy cell lines. And that is when you end up with a mosaic. A mosaic is a problem of an embryo where one of the cells divides incorrectly after, in the first few days of embryo life. So then you end up with 2 lines of cells, a healthy line and an unhealthy line. And that is a mosaic.
And if we're talking about percentages, because I believe from what I've seen in the literature, that's how they are identified in terms of the level of this damage that you're referring to, the level of the problematic cell lines, assuming testing on day 5, 6, or sometimes day 7 for blastocyst, that what percentage are you looking at then when you're defining the mosaics? Because I know that's pretty integral to this topic.
It really depends on the laboratory where the embryos were formed, and it really depends on the technique used to analyze these embryos and the laboratory where these embryos were analyzed. Okay, so for example, let's use a very bad example. Okay, like for glucose and diabetes. If I say that if you have this level of glucose or up, you have diabetes. This level of glucose or down, you don't. Okay, now there might be a few people that have a lower level of glucose and have diabetes, but they're just a few. Now, what I could do is then say, okay, maybe if I put the glucose level here to be normal, then everybody that has diabetes will be included in my diagnosis. But what's going to happen with that? A lot of people that don't have diabetes will be diagnosed as diabetes. Okay.
Yes.
When you use the technique NGS to analyze the chromosomes in these embryos, that can happen. So if you make your test too precise, okay,
like the next generation,
you're going to miss out on a lot of cells that are abnormal. But if you are too broad, then you're going to end up with an interpretation that a lot of these cells are abnormal. Okay, and that is why when you look at the literature, you can find anywhere from 2% of embryos will be mosaics, all the way up to 20-25% of embryos being mosaic. The number is certainly somewhere in the middle, or more towards 5% likely.
Which is frustrating for people because then they're obviously trying to decide what to do next. So let's give a real life situation, which I've definitely seen, I'm sure you have. Let's say a couple or an individual presents and they have had 3 embryos analyzed. Now, granted, I appreciate what you're saying about the NGS sequencing or just the more broader PGTA. But let's say out of those 3 embryos, they have one that's euploid. Seemingly, it's got the less than 20% cell damage. It's good to go. But then the other 2, there's question marks. And maybe one of them is a low-level mosaic, defined depending on where you look at under 40% or under 50%. And then the other one's high level. What typically is the advice that couple will be given in that situation?
So the advice will be first, obviously, transfer the euploid.
Yes.
Now, low-level mosaics, that's something that if you look at the latest literature, they're not even dividing them in low or high level anymore. They're saying low levels are euploid.
Yes. Because they have the same outcomes, don't they?
Yes, they have the same outcome, the same risks, the same everything. So now low-level mosaics are considered euploid embryos, and depending on the lab you work with, it won't even be reported. You will receive that it says euploid. Now,
transferable.
Oh, shoot. Yeah.
I was just going to ask in the terms of the gray area, I'd love your opinion on, I've seen it somewhat debated in terms of defining the low-level mosaic, whether it be up to 50% or whether it be up to 40%. So would you be happy with it up to 50%?
The reason it's 50%. The only reason they say 40% is because normally you remove 5 cells from an embryo.
Okay.
So it's got to be a multiple of 5.
Yes,
and that's
yes.
Okay,
that's
so
fair.
it's 20, 40, 68.
50,
That's why it was defined that way. If you have 40%, it's less than half. If you have 60%, it's more than half. So it's a high mosaic.
Yes.
Okay.
High mosaic,
but I mean, the line is 50 because sometimes you extract more than 5 cells or sometimes less. Okay. Now, low-level mosaics, I think that there should not be any discussion anymore. Those embryos should definitely
are good to go.
Be transferred. High-level mosaics, what is the difference? The high-level mosaics, the problem is they tend to implant less and they tend to miscarry more. Okay? But if you look at a high-level mosaic, the chances of having a healthy live birth are in the realms of 25-28%. Okay? And the babies born don't seem to exhibit much higher risks of developing the issue that was found in this result. Okay.
Interesting.
So, and in the last meta-analysis, they're might even putting into question the fact that they miscarry more. We do still believe it, because the majority of studies have found that. But in the last meta-analysis published this year, they're saying they implant less, they miscarry almost the same. But let's see, they do miscarry more. But where if you transfer a euploid embryo, you have a live birth rate of 45-50%. When you transfer a high mosaic, you have a live birth of around 25-28%. In my opinion,
and the high level
all guidelines, those should be transferred.
The high level mosaic should still be transferred.
Without a doubt.
Interesting. And just for clarity's sake for people, so the high level mosaic being defined as, am I right in saying 50 to 80% cell damage, and 80% and above is more aneuploid?
Yeah.
Okay. So the aneuploid territory, so over 80% cell damage would be more of a no for transfer.
Yes. Normally, when you have a euploid, an aneuploid embryo, all the cells are bad.
Oh, okay, right. So
all the cells. If you have 80%, it's a high mosaic.
Okay.
All the cells are bad. That's an aneuploid.
Okay.
So now the thing is, just to explain a little further, when you look, so we don't understand, okay, if currently mosaicisms are part of the division process
that they'll just be discarded later.
Because when you look at when you've done studies where you found that there was a mosaic, and then patients for some reason decided not to transfer that embryo, okay, and they donated that embryo for research, and what has been done is then all the cells in this embryo have been analyzed. So remove all the trophectoderm cells, what's going to form the placenta, which is normally where we do the biopsy when we're doing PGTA. But then we get the inner cell mass. That's going to form the baby, okay? And we analyze all these cells. We generally find that only in around 15 to 25% of the times, we find that mosaicism in the inner cell mass.
Interesting.
Meaning
which makes so much sense.
Remain in the placenta. Now, when you have more of these cells being abnormal, then there's a higher chance that these abnormal cells are also found
in the inner cell mass.
In the placenta. Okay, so this seems to be why, right? If a lot of these cells, we still don't know if these cells that are abnormal, whether they just die out or self-correct. Okay, we believe that it's that they tend to die out. So imagine that if the majority of the cells are going to die out, then there's less cells in this embryo to implant and to develop.
Yes, of course.
It kind of makes sense, right?
It does
still
completely.
Finding what it really is, but that seems to be where the key
just an analogy that I have found somewhat helpful for people to visualize this, because I know it's really confusing for people, is the idea of an apple. And you know the way if you cut into an apple and open it up, a fundamentally flawed embryo, shall we say, is like rotten to the core. If you're talking about that 80% and above. But I consider the mosaic like the apple with a bruise, and we've all cut away the bruise, and it's a perfect apple. And it's the same with the embryos being able to go on to develop.
And they will do that themselves.
Yes, they'll do that themselves, exactly, as part of the self-correction, because it's so early. So getting to those higher level mosaic cases. So I'm thinking of a couple actually that I dealt with last year. They had, I think it was about 5 embryos, and they were all mosaics. And they ended up going for genetic counseling to try to figure out, because I think one of them had something noted about Edwards syndrome. So they're like, we're not too happy to transfer that one. But when it comes to the categorizing of embryos, if somebody finds themselves in that frustrating position, because let's say they're trying to bank embryos and they really want to get some euploids, but they're all mosaics, and let's say the majority are high-level mosaics, is there a way of categorizing like the difference between, segmental or fulcrums? And is there a way of selecting the better ones?
Yeah. So normally you start with low-level mosaics, right? If you get that classification, many times you don't anymore. And within those, the segmentals should go first.
Yes.
Okay, the segmentals. Now in the low levels, they're euploid. Let's forget about low-level mosaics. Okay. Now when you're talking about the high-level mosaics, you generally start with the segmentals. The segmentals have less miscarriages, have more live birth rates. Now after that, which comes next? We really don't know. I mean, if there's one chromosome affected, then you'll go for that one before than if it's 2 chromosomes affected. Okay, but should the one that has the chromosome 14 go before the chromosome 16? We don't. Our studies are not large enough to know. We just don't have that data.
Okay.
We just
Okay.
don't.
And in terms of then a couple or individual giving that informed consent, because it must be very tough on your side of the fence trying to advise on this and, how best to proceed. How is it phrased to people in terms of saying, okay, look, we reckon the odds of live birth being X, Y, or Z, and the odds of miscarriage, or indeed the odds of fetal abnormality, because obviously if someone is worried about potentially needing to terminate for medical reasons, that's a horror you wouldn't wish upon anyone. So how is that conveyed to people?
Yeah. So what I tell patients when we have a result, I tell them, look, you're going to have a consultation with a geneticist. That's going to explain to you what would happen, okay, if your child had this abnormality that has been found in PGTA. Now, the person that's going to tell you what are the chances of your baby having that's me, not the geneticist.
Yes.
And what I do tell the patients is, well, yeah, when you transfer a mosaic embryo, if it's a low mosaic, they're euploid. But high mosaic embryos, they miscarry more, they implant less, but the babies born have a marginal increased risk of having that problem. So in my opinion, and I do understand the fears. I do understand because, and that's why I'm always very, I don't know if strict is the word, but what I tell about all doctors and patients, if you're not going to want to transfer a mosaic embryo, then what I need to tell you is that if we do PGTA, this test is actually reducing your chances of having a baby. If you agree to that, then we do PGTA. But otherwise, we cannot say PGTA increases your chances of having a baby, and then we refuse to transfer mosaic embryos and even segmental aneuploidies.
Yes.
These are embryos that are classified as aneuploid, and nobody transfers them. Whereas these embryos also have a 25% chance of healthy live birth. And the babies born don't seem to have those segmental aneuploidies. Only one had it in all the studies that have been done on these embryos.
And this is huge from a moral, ethical, medical negligence standpoint. If we think historically embryos being destroyed and just immediately dumped without giving the opportunity to, because I have a couple at the moment who they have a large number of embryos. And even though many of them have tested as actually even higher damage, like over the 80%, they've elected to still keep them frozen because she said, well, you never know where science might go and what might be possible, especially with AI in the near future. So that's a very good point. So I think I can really see the shift in terms of, what people are opting to do now. And people are much more likely to transfer, provided they obviously feel they have enough information to make an informed decision. And I think in that context too, very important to say, because sometimes people, I think, maybe are misinformed or it's explained to them wrong about when you're doing, PGTA. With any of this, it's a screening. It's never 100% guarantee. I've seen problems even with euploid embryos.
Absolutely.
So, that's just an important distinction to make for people.
Oh, absolutely agree with you. Yeah. And that's why more tests isn't always better.
Yeah, it's very difficult for people.
There's a lot of culture of let's test everything just to be sure. We need to be very careful. I did a presentation the other day on how the indiscriminate use of PGTA actually is making things worse, right? And for example, doing PGTA in embryos that come from younger eggs, eggs come from donors or women that are 35 or lower. In these cycles where PGTA was performed, actually, there was less babies than in the cycles where PGTA wasn't done.
Yes.
Right? Yet there's a lot of use of PGTA in this younger population, and it's not offering them any benefit.
I think it's really more for, those the cases where they've like PCOS, if somebody just has tons of embryos, if you 16 embryos or something, I can understand
I can get it.
trying to use some method to help you to select which do I transfer, so you're not going through umpteen
Yes.
FEP cycles.
Yes.
That's
Yeah.
fair enough. But I
Yes.
completely agree that when it's whittled down, unless someone is in a category of having recurrent implantation failure, or recurrent miscarriage, or just something that isn't adding up, then
Yes.
it isn't automatically giving them an
Yes.
additional benefit,
Exactly. Exactly.
But it is understandable why people might look to doing it if they have a history of those problems.
Oh, yeah. Or a patient that has had, that has a brother with Down syndrome.
Of course. Yeah.
I
Any
get
family
it. And I understand all those reasons, and I will always support them. But I am very clear. We're doing this because we want to avoid this. And what's the cost? A potential reduction
cost benefit
in your
analysis.
chances of having a baby.
Yeah,
Okay.
very much
But
so.
those things need to be explained, because if we're saying, no, we're going to select the best embryo so you get pregnant quicker, and then you end up with a mosaic embryo that you won't transfer, you just cancel that patient's chances of having a baby.
Yeah, which is cruel. There was something I saw, I don't know if you have thoughts on this. There was something I saw in the meta-analysis that was published in August, where they were just comparing outcomes. And while they said there wasn't much difference in outcome, the only thing they could really find with the mosaics was slightly lower birth weight. And I was trying to figure out why that might be. Maybe it goes back to the placental function. What do you think
Look,
about that?
the difference in birth weight was very small.
Okay.
It was
So
very
you don't think it
small.
was clinically
And
significant?
I wouldn't know the reasoning. Could it be because of problems in the placenta? Could be. I wouldn't
Yeah,
know why.
maybe.
I wouldn't know why I would tell you. But yes, that was the only difference
The
that
only
they found
difference.
in perinatal
Yeah.
outcomes, was that
And
they made a
not
little
in the
bit of.
actual babies, just the weight. So I
No,
think that's pretty
exactly.
good.
And
If you're
yeah,
looking for things that could be a
yeah,
negative, I think that's important for
yeah.
people to
And
know that.
the babies, their genetics were euploid.
Yeah, we're perfectly
So yeah,
healthy.
no, to everybody
Yeah.
here, if you have a mosaic embryo, transfer it. Now,
Of
there's always certain precautions that we take. For
course.
example, if you have a mosaic of a chromosome 13, 18, or 21.
So you're Edward, Patau, and
Exactly,
yes,
Pateau, Edwards, Downs, right?
sounds.
And likely in 2 years, we'll stop having that precaution,
Yeah. Okay.
because I mean, we're seeing that the results do not follow what we're seeing in the mosaicisms. So why should we be more afraid? We shouldn't, I think. But of course, that's a harder decision to make, because you're seeing something that could give you a childhood problem, right? And that makes it harder. And
Yeah,
I do
absolutely.
understand, but again, another example of why we should do a test when it's indicated, and not just
Not
before.
automatically. And is that something you're seeing, that PGTA is being just de facto recommended in every case?
Depends on the country. Depends on the
Yeah,
country. I mean, in
it
the
is a
US,
country thing. Yes.
yeah, in the
Yeah.
US, something like 70% of, or
Yes.
80% have
Yes.
PGTA. I mean, it's a matter of economics. I mean, a cycle of IVF in the US,
It's
what
so
is
expensive.
25,000?
Mm,
So adding a
mhm.
couple of thousand for PGTA, everyone's going to be like, yeah, throw it
Yeah,
in.
of course. Yeah.
In other countries, that's a
Mhm.
huge difference. So yeah.
Yeah, so it's important to bear in mind where you're having your treatment too, because it could be quite different in terms of the advice that you're receiving. So on that note, I'm just going to go to the chat to look at some of the questions. Important to say, guys, you can pop your questions into the chat if there's anything you want to ask about specifically. And there's one here I just noted, because I think we may have touched on it, but a high-level mosaic chromosome 14 impacted, concerned about the UPD. How common is it?
The
So
UPD, can you?
I'm not. I'm presuming, is it pregnancy? Would that be the odds of success? Oh, maybe undiagnosed pregnancy defects. Is that what you mean?
Oh, could that be? Well,
Could be
not
that it?
yeah, I think we answered that, right?
Okay.
Any of the chromosomes, if you have a mosaicism, in even in high mosaics, there's just a
Yeah.
marginal increase in risk of your
In
child
risk.
having a problem in comparison to a euploid embryo. I would transfer it, understanding the implant less, the miscarry more.
Yeah.
But I would certainly, I wouldn't think twice if I was the patient. Let's
And
say
so I
that.
presume for those cases, people would probably choose to opt for the NIPT, the neonatal, the prenatal testing, so that they can
Mhm.
get a better gauge maybe of the health of the embryo,
Yeah.
as in early pregnancy.
Yeah. Well, the recommendation is to do a screening, of course, in these pregnancies,
Yes,
right?
yeah, of course, yeah,
Of
okay,
course.
just to be sure. And then someone says, what is the odds of a mosaic embryo leading to a healthy birth with no health issues? I think you
Well,
noted
what
that
we
earlier.
said
It's
before, if
pretty
it's a high
pretty
mosaic, a
simple.
25% chance of a live birth,
Yes.
25,
Okay.
28,
By comparison to a euploid, which is about, you said 50,
50, 45,
50,
50.
45, 50. Okay.
So a
And is that,
euploid embryo will miscarry between around 10% of the
and
times. A mosaic might miscarry in the realms of 20%, 25% of
right,
the time.
okay. And does that seem to differ depending on the age of the woman who's transferring the embryo back in? Like, does it matter transferring
So
a
there
mosaic
isn't,
whether you're
so
25 or 45?
mosaicisms are not associated to age.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Okay.
But the implantation of the embryos does. Because even
Mm,
a euploid embryo
of course.
at
Yeah.
30 implants more than a euploid
Mm.
embryo at 43, 44.
Just because of the mechanisms that are involved in the
Because there's
implantation.
other
Yeah.
things that not
Yes,
just the
exactly.
chromosomes, like
Yeah.
metabolic,
Mhm.
problems, mitochondrial problems in embryos that will halt the
Mhm.
development, right?
Immune, microbiome. Yeah,
Mm.
there's a lot. Yeah, that makes sense. I think that's key thing to note for people, that remember we're just talking about one half of the equation here, which is the embryo quality or potential embryo quality, but there's still the entire of the internal environment
Mm.
to think about as well. So it's more complex picture. You have to include both. And somebody else asks here, is there a risk of abnormality in the inner cell mass when the trophectoderm is normal or shows low level abnormality? I think you somewhat touched on that earlier on.
Yeah, around 15 to 25% of biopsies that have the diagnosis of mosaic,
Hmm.
that mosaic will be found in the inner cell mass.
Right.
We
Okay.
might, since the babies born seem to be all fine,
Mm.
we might then conclude that it could be the ones that miscarry are the ones that had more, right, compromise
Mm.
in the inner cell
Hmm.
mass.
Of course.
I'm assuming here, but it would
Yes.
make sense, right? Or either that or they self-corrected.
Exactly. And on that note, do you think there's going to be much difference? I imagine there will be. Hard to imagine that it wouldn't in the next even year to 5 years, given AI and its involvement in screening, and whether that will be of additional benefit
Yeah,
for
yeah.
screening mosaics.
I think it's going to be basically mega data.
Mm.
AI is going to allow
Mm.
us, right, to if
Yeah.
we find a way to ethically and correctly input data from clinics into some engine of AI, we're going to
Hmm.
have such beautiful data. The problem is that clinics are very reluctant to share their data.
Oh, I see. Okay. Why would that be?
Commercial reasons, because if
Just
you input
okay.
your data, then you know how many cycles
Are
of
we really the best?
coolant, or yeah,
Okay.
other than
Yeah.
the other, the UK, you
Mhm.
have to report them, and they
Mm,
have.
to the
But
HFEA, yeah,
you go in Ireland, in Spain. There was a clinic
sure.
in Ireland that published like 100%
Mm,
implantation rates from euploid embryos. I'm like,
yeah,
my God, where did you
God.
get that? Right?
Yeah,
So that
yeah.
is yeah, that's what's going to be halting now.
Mm,
I do think that a combination. I think that the future will be a combination of AI and non-invasive
mm,
PGTA.
mhm. Which would be incredible if we can get to that point, or the point of being able to,
They're in the
yeah.
realms of 80, 85, 80%
Wow.
accuracy now with
Mm,
non-invasive PGTA. What they do is they take these embryos to day 5,
mhm,
preferably day 6, and then
mhm.
they aspirate the culture media around the embryo that has
Ah,
embryonic DNA,
that's giving it
and they
off. Yeah, yeah.
analyze that DNA.
Huh.
Currently, in comparison to invasive PGTA, which is the one we all
Mhm.
use, it's around 80, whereas PGTA is around the realms of 97, 98%.
It's
This
very
one's an
close.
80, 85. And it's been 80,
Interesting.
85 for the last
For
couple
a
of years.
while.
But
Okay.
I think that AI in comparison to that will definitely give us answers.
Yeah, I saw, what was the study recently where I felt so sorry for these embryologists, where they'd been spending ages looking for sperm in the ejaculate of an azoospermic case. And, after 2 or 3 days, couldn't find any sperm, and AI found it in 1 hour.
In 1 hour.
It's just,
In one.
I mean, yeah, that's very
Yeah.
telling.
Yeah.
And I was interested by what you said there about how for the culture media that you're letting it go to day 6, because, just thinking of some of the data on euploids, if I'm remembering this correctly, that the day 5 euploids do percentage-wise better than the day 6s, and indeed if it went to day 7. So are they feeling that letting it go to day 6 is still advantageous because of the AI being used?
The difference there is that it's not the same thing, an embryo that made it to blastocyst on day 5, and you let it for an extra day, than an embryo
that didn't,
on day 5 was still a morula,
and had to get to day,
into a blastocyst on day 6.
on day 6. Fair.
That's the
Okay.
difference. And yes, they do have a slightly lower euploidy rate and a lower implantation rate. Yes, but that's a different. It's a consequence of it going late,
having to wait
versus
to
letting
get there.
it.
Yeah, that makes sense. Of course. Thanks for clarifying that for people. So yeah, it looks like it's going to be pretty exciting over the next few years, but I appreciate for anybody who, I mean, exciting for us, but for anybody who's living this right now, I would never use the word exciting. It can be exhausting. It can be very draining process. So, I'm certainly not making light of that at all.
Yes.
But when it comes to, I think it's overall, it's a very positive message to people with regard to mosaics, where I think it can be quite scary for people. They see the report. I've, had plenty of couples speaking to me about, like, what does this mean? And does that mean we're not going to have a healthy baby? And I'm like, no, not necessarily at all. You can't guarantee it, but it is important for people to know that they have their chance and opportunity there, which I think is a vital distinction to make.
I would go, let me interrupt you. I would go as far.
I
would go as far to say that if I did PGTA with my partner and I only had a mosaic embryo, I wouldn't form more embryos. I would transfer this one first, and if it didn't work, I'd form more after.
Yes. Okay.
But yeah, because it kind of broke my heart. A patient that you mentioned before, they had 5 mosaic embryos, and they were forming more. I'm like, oh my god. Oh my god.
Yeah, I
That
know.
that patient could easily have 2 children out of those 5
From
embryos.
that group. Yeah. And this is where it brings back in the sort of ethical questions of, how many millions of embryos are frozen around the world, that fall into that category.
Tremendous amount.
Many. So yeah, it's something that people have to think about very carefully, because I appreciate that, particularly in Spain, for those who maybe aren't aware. I find it good that the law falls on the side of the embryo. So this thinking of, that if someone tests and has a euploid embryo, they're required to transfer that embryo before being allowed to make any more, which is, of course, why people end up batching and testing the biopsies all at once. But I do appreciate
which
that.
is something that I'm not very happy with.
Yeah, exactly. I know.
Because the idea of badging embryos is okay. If you have if you're in an age that 20% of your embryos are going to be euploid, and 80% aneuploid, it makes sense. Let's form 5 embryos, right? But I mean, statistics doesn't work that way. The good embryo could be the first one.
Exactly.
And then you've done 2 more IVFs to form 4 aneuploid embryos. And you just did 2 full IVF cycles for absolutely no reason. So those are things that need to be explained. So that's why when patients talk to me about badging, about banking, I tell them, okay, we can do that. And I tell them, well, no, we can do that. No, if you want to do it, we're going to do it. But I got to tell you that you might end up be doing, IVF for absolutely no reason. Or what if we have 1 embryo on the first one and another embryo on the second one? I tell them,
then what about all the others?
If you want 2 kids, I would understand. Okay, let's batch. But if you're telling me, no, I just want 1 kid, then you might be doing treatments for no reason. Don't ban embryos.
That's always the first question I would ask people, typically in the consult, is like, what is your ideal family size? And sometimes people give caveats like, oh, I'd be lucky to have 1. But like, if their goal is 3 or 4 kids, fine. Okay. Then bank when your eggs are at a younger age makes sense. So you're not stressing in the future. But it's so frequent, exactly as you said, that maybe I see somebody already has 1 and they're looking to add to their family. But then if they're going to have loads of embryos, there's actually a case a few years back, a number of years, it's pre-COVID. When I think back now, this lovely lady, I'd seen her for her first 2. So she'd had her 2 daughters, and she still had, at this point, imagine this, she still had 5 euploid embryos left. And she was coming in to me one day, she was prepping for the transfer, and she said, Jessica, is it terrible that I'm kind of wishing this doesn't work? And I said, oh, why? And she said, because I just don't like thinking of all these frozen potential babies there. And I can't have that many more children.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I don't want to leave them there. You know, it's this awful dilemma that people then face. And I know, look, I know that's a great problem to have. I understand that. But I think it is a key thing to note. Have we lost Hans there?
Yeah, I lost you for a second. Here I am again.
Don't worry. I'm just trying to get you back on camera. Maybe just check your setting there. I can hear you at least, though, but I just can't.
Can you? I see myself.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
I can't see you at my end, but maybe that's just me. So apologies, guys, for any tech issues.
I can see you and see myself.
Okay, fair enough. I'll double check here with Caroline. No, apparently we can't see you. Caroline is saying.
So let me try
for the video.
This and try again.
It popped up with the symbol of your name. Sorry, guys, bear with us a second. So there you are. We have you back.
There we go.
We're
Fantastic.
fine.
Okay.
So yeah, I think she's good. Yeah, we're back live. We're good. So yeah, that dilemma that I think people can face is really an important one, because people are being often misinformed as to, you know, how the level of negative outcome that is likely because of having mosaics, or only having mosaics, as opposed to having the hallowed euploid. But I think we've pretty much put that to rest now, that they don't need to be stressing, particularly if it's under the 50%, and even if it's over that, to just have a conversation about what that might entail, you know, and obviously doing the NIP testing and doing all the necessary screening. But ultimately, that's the best you can do, because this isn't, you know, miracle science. Everybody's doing their absolute best, but, you know, you can't guarantee that that's a perfect embryo being transferred.
Yeah, it's been a perfect case of how technology went faster than our knowledge.
Yes.
You know, we found things
got
that
ahead
we
of
were not
ourselves.
expecting, and now what the hell do we do with this?
How
do you transfer an embryo? I have a report telling me this embryo has an issue. How on earth do I? So I understand it. I understand it, but I think that at least for the last 2 years or more, even the knowledge has been there. These embryos should
Yeah, it has. And you could see that change. I remember watching it over the years, just the shift in understanding even what mosaics were, you know, because it was so new initially. So I'm glad to see that we've evolved at this point.
Yeah, no, and there's guidelines, there's everything already written saying that transfer these embryos, no questions.
Yeah,
just
which is key for people.
The precautions that we've spoken about, but other than that, it should be.
It should be good to go, which is wonderful. I think that's a very positive thing. And I'm just looking to see, there seems to be a couple more questions. One here, could a segmental aneuploid be a mosaic? Is there a cutoff on what is mosaic versus a segmental aneuploid? So this is a very nuanced question.
Yeah, the segmental aneuploidies are still. I mean, it's probably what we have least research on. Okay, we believe that around, depending on the study you read, around 50 to 75% of these segmental aneuploidies are a problem in the cell division once the embryo was formed. What I explained to you, what happens in mosaics.
With the cell lines,
and 25 to 30% of these embryos are what we call meiotic problems, meaning they came either from the egg or the sperm, hence all the cells will be out.
More fundamental.
Now, the problem is when you have a segmental aneuploidy and then you do that inner cell mass study, you find, depending, again, studies are small still, anywhere from 50 to 65, 70% of these embryos that you have a segmental aneuploidy diagnosed, they are not in the inner cell mass.
It's only out in the trophectoderm.
Only in the trophectoderm. The problem is knowing which of these embryos they are. Okay, there's, I mean, the largest series of embryos transfer segmental aneuploidies doesn't reach 100. Okay, they're small still, and what they found is, yes, again, these segmental aneuploidies, they kind of behave like high mosaics. Okay, and they have around a live birth rate of around 25% again. Okay, and in this largest series, I think in all the series tabulated, there's been one baby born with that segmental aneuploidy. The rest of the babies, we're healthy.
Okay. Okay.
So there's a moment that, you know, we need to I guess trust the data, right?
Mm,
And I know it's soon, but then these are conversations that should be had before doing PGTA.
yeah.
But what worries me is that doctors are not given enough time to
Mm-hmm.
talk this in you know, thoroughly,
Mm-hmm.
or they don't talk about this, right?
Yes.
But it's something that's
At
very
all.
important, right?
I agree. Yeah. And
And yeah,
it often isn't being discussed. So I'm just
exactly.
conscious of time for you. I just want to
Yeah,
get to this last question here.
of course.
Just because apologies, everyone, Dr. Hans does have to head off a little bit before 8 or 9 your time. So this person asked, quick question. I'm 42 with 2 euploid and 2 50% right on the cusp mosaic embryos. Should I do one more cycle to bank another embryo or go ahead with transfer now? I'm worried that if it fails, I'll be 43, 44.
Well,
Guess your answer to
again, how
that.
many babies you want? If the
Exactly.
answer is
Yeah.
one,
Yeah.
I wouldn't even consider.
Mm,
I'd start, but the
I
thing
agree.
is,
Hmm.
I think that we are spending too much time trying to figure out why an embryo did not implant.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
If you look at research,
Hmm.
the only well done studies, two,
Hmm. Hmm.
done on what the concept of recurrent implantation failure is,
Hmm.
that were done only with the transfers of euploid embryos,
Hmm.
they found the exact same implantation rates
Outcome.
in the first 5 euploid
Yeah.
embryos
Yeah.
transferred,
Mm.
60%
Hmm.
consistently.
Hmm.
Okay, these studies, and what the only thing they assessed in these patients was that the uterine cavity was normal.
Hmm.
No natural killer cells, no
Cells.
ERAs, no
Yeah.
microbe,
Nothing.
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 Just make sure that there wasn't a fibroid or a polyp in there.
Hmm.
Okay,
Or the
and
lining
then they
thickness.
started transferring embryos.
Mm.
60%, 60. Okay, so
Mm.
if we look at these two studies, which are the only ones that are very well done in terms of
Hmm.
recurrent implantation failure, it seems to not exist. It
Mm.
seems to point in the direction that all these implantation tests
Hmm.
that we are doing are probably not giving patients any clinical benefit.
Hmm.
They're taking away tons of money,
Hmm.
right? That could be used to keep on doing the one thing that has evidence to work, which is
Hmm.
keep on transferring embryos. But
Transferring
not
embryos.
only that, you end
Hmm.
up with a patient that has 4 or 3 embryos or 4 embryos, I can't remember,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
she's worried that she doesn't have time to transfer them. Well, if she did a transfer, one transfer per month,
Hmm.
she'd have plenty of time. If she
Hmm.
doesn't have a pregnancy, to do
Hmm.
another cycle for that pregnancy. But if
Yeah.
after each transfer, we're going to end up doing 50 studies that take
Hmm.
3 months for those studies to come back,
The
and the
results.
same
Yeah.
for transfers take a year.
Yeah, exactly. In
And
terms
then the
of time.
prognosis does change.
Would you have a number limit in mind in those cases? I know you said you could do one month after the other, let's say, and you'd be through the embryos quickly. But let's say for someone who's like, listen, I've transferred 2 now. I would like to do a bit more testing. Would you have a number limit where you say, okay, we will look at some stuff
So
before?
when I have consultations, I always have a presentation, okay? And in that presentation, I have a graph of these
Hmm.
two studies.
Hmm.
And when I tell patients, when we fail the transfer, I tell them, look, okay, according to these studies, if I ask you for A, B, C, and D tests,
Hmm.
what these studies are telling me is that likely all I'm doing is make you waste money.
Hmm.
Okay? But I do test, I tell them. I don't think it's wrong testing
Hmm.
either.
Hmm.
But if we do test, what I tell them is let's limit ourselves to what guidelines recommend.
Hmm. Hmm.
Let's test the uterine cavity.
Hmm.
Let's test for the antiphospholipid syndrome, not
Syndrome.
thrombophilia,
Hmm.
just the antiphospholipid
Antiphospholipid. Yeah.
syndrome.
Mm.
Okay, that's it. Make sure
Yeah.
that the endometrium is thick. Now,
Mhm.
if all that is fine,
Mhm.
let's go ahead. Now, more research is coming in CD138, chronic
Mhm.
endometritis.
Mhm. Mhm.
Research seems compelling. There's some
On a
meta-analysis
microbiome.
now
Yeah.
showing. So that's something else that I do. But I
Mhm.
tell them likely,
Mhm.
if these results come abnormal and we do something to change them, and you get pregnant on the next transfer, I tell them I refuse to take the credit because I need to be consequent. If
Yeah.
I decide to
Yeah.
play the game of medicine, I need to follow the rules of medicine. I
Rules,
cannot play
yeah.
soccer and decide to grab the ball with my hand. Then
Yeah.
it's Gaelic half.
Yes. Good
Right?
point.
But if I
I love that
choose
Irish reference, Hans.
there you go. But if I choose the rules of medicine, I need to follow them. And
Yeah.
I cannot say, okay, I'm going to follow them up to here. But in this part, I'm going to choose
We're
to
gonna
do
go
50
rogue.
tests that have no evidence that every fertility society is telling me not to do, just because I'm eager to find an explanation to give my patient. I think doctors need to learn to be okay at saying, I don't know why I did, but research is telling me that we just should transfer another embryo. Because
And
when you
that's,
test an
yeah.
embryo, you're just looking at the bookshelves in that library. I don't know if there's a misspelled word in one of the pages in that book. I don't know if the mitochondria, the librarian had breakfast that day, and that's why it didn't open the library. And that embryo did not. There's 1,000 other reasons why an embryo might not implant. And research is kind of pointing more and more in the direction that most of the times issues are coming from the embryo more than the endometrium. Not saying the endometrium is not involved, not at all. There
Yeah,
is,
of course.
they are.
Yeah.
But
And it's interesting you say that, because it shows the very frustrating sort of back and forth that happens where, I've had clients say to me, well, I'm on all these litany of drugs. I have no idea why I'm taking any of them, but hopefully something will work. It's sometimes, I think, the case where the clinic or consultant feels under pressure from the patients that, well, you must do something. So then it's like a token dose of steroids.
Yeah.
I'm like, well, that isn't even enough if you did have an immune issue. So, but they, you're not looking. So it's just, it's getting all lost in translation.
Yeah,
I
no,
think,
and
which can be very frustrating.
we saw that very clearly
So
with the ERA test, right? It came in 2011. It came
yes,
out.
yes,
Your window
yes, yeah,
implantation. Oh,
yeah.
the
Oh my God, it
the
was
first
endless.
randomized control study
Yeah.
came out in 2017. We did this test for 6 years without a single peer-reviewed research
Single
paper.
difference.
But if you didn't
Yeah,
do it,
it's
patients would
crazy.
stop coming to you because the
People would
clinic
freak
next
out.
door would tell them,
Yeah.
and they didn't do the ERA, my God. And the worst
This
thing
is
is
the
that
new test. Yeah.
that produced this, every single ESHRE,
A
every
test.
single congress, they say, oh, the data is looking wonderful. We're just not done compiling it. Next year we'll do the publication. And nothing, and nothing, and nothing, until an independent group did that research and said, hey, this doesn't seem to work. Then a second RCT came and said, this doesn't seem to work. And that's when iGenomics said, oh yeah,
Oh,
oh yeah,
yeah.
no, yeah, it
Now that
doesn't
we've
work.
made
And what's worse, a year after, a study came and analyzed only what had happened to these patients where you modified the date, and actually these patients were getting pregnant less. So
less.
this
Yeah, I
test
saw that.
actually
Yeah.
made things worse, and
Worse.
we did it anyway for 10
Yeah.
years at €1,000 a pop. That's why
Yeah.
we can't just climb into every single test that comes into the market, because these things happen. These things
Yes,
happen a
completely.
lot more than we want to accept.
Though I do empathize. I mean, look, kind of like in the realm of cancer treatment where people are desperate and, they'll
Oh yeah,
try any treatment or new thing that's available. I think it's kind of comparable in the world of
yes,
fertility,
of
because
course.
people are also feeling very vulnerable
Yeah,
and desperate.
yeah,
So
yeah,
they do anything. They stand on their
of
head.
course,
They do anything
of
you
course.
told them to do.
Yeah.
So very final question before Hans runs. The last one here says, is the rate of mosaicism correlated to maternal or paternal age in the same way that aneuploidy is?
No. Because again, these
Okay.
the aneuploid embryos come from what I was telling you, a meiotic issue. So it is a bad egg or a bad
Fundamental
sperm,
meiotic
right?
cell. Yeah.
90% of the times a bad egg, 10% of the times a bad sperm. So then the first fertilized egg that's formed already has an abnormal number of chromosomes. In a mosaic, no, the fertilized egg is normal.
It's happening later.
The mistake happened later. So this happening later of the
Later.
mistake is irrespective of age.
Random mutation. Yeah.
Random
Yes. Okay.
mistakes
And
or a normal
is it
natural
random?
process
Yeah.
that we still haven't learned that. was there.
Yeah,
But likely
that's a
just
very good
errors
point.
that are self-corrected.
Yeah, which I think we have to remember, like, if you look at the biology of the thing, it's a miracle any of us are here, Hans. I mean, it's so many layers. We're all little miracles, every single one of us walking around. So I think it is important to remember that and put it in context,
Yes.
that it is true. We haven't got all the answers.
I always address this, like in how, when I explain things in consultation, I always talk about how, let's look at ourselves as an animal that we are, right? And animals that live for many years cannot have a lot of babies. Where do you put all humans if we had 100 babies a year like rabbits do, right? So animals that live short periods
It's true.
need a lot of babies, otherwise they
Yeah.
go into extinction. So our fertility is not great. It's not great. And on top of that,
No.
until the early 1900s, the average life of humans was 30 years. We died at 30.
We've changed.
And we're having babies at 40. It's understandable that nature would affect our fertility so that we don't have kids that we're not going to be around to mind, right?
Yeah.
So all these things naturally make a lot of sense. But when you're in it,
absolutely.
you know, and
Yeah.
that's so hard.
Perfect parting note.
And on that note,
so on that front, yeah, I think this has been a wonderful discussion. I really have enjoyed delving into it and understanding better about the mosaicisms and all the stages in the process, because it's such important information for people to get. I really hope that people will share this link, when the recording goes live, and understand how much of an impact it can actually have on people's lives if they're thinking, oh, I can actually transfer this embryo or embryos and I can have my family this way. That's ultimately a much more positive and optimistic note for people, rather than desperately trying to bank endless embryos. So is there any parting words of encouragement or wisdom that you'd have for people who are struggling with what they're going through? Hello?
Can you hear me now?
Oh, I love the way I just, yeah, I can just about hear you. It's just for your parting words of wisdom to people before we finish up.
Hello, I cannot hear you. I lost volume.
Okay. I'm just checking.
Can you hear me? Not your head.
Checking with tech support if we can get you back.
I can't hear. Can you hear me, Jessica?
I can hear you.
Can you hear me?
And I'll pop it in the chat. Yeah, I can hear you.
Well, I cannot hear you, but you asked me any parting words. So what I would say, number one, if you have mosaic embryos, transfer them. Okay. For people that only have mosaic embryos, this understanding that you can transfer them can mean from 0 chances of having a baby to potentially 40-50% chances if you have more than one mosaic embryo, right?
Interesting.
Just have that consultation with a gynecologist, have that consultation with a geneticist, do your NIPT, do your screening in the first trimester, just for reassurance. But your chances, if you do get pregnant, of having a healthy baby are pretty much the same that if you transfer a euploid embryo. And throughout this process, let me finish what I always say to all my patients is, guys, I know you're going through a horrendously difficult time. Do not isolate yourself. Surround yourself by people you love, but choose them wisely. Choose the people that are willing to give you support, not advice. Because we tend to confuse both of them, right? And the problem is that people end up giving you advice that has 0 science behind it, most of the times wrong, and most of the times generates feelings of guilt. And the last thing you need after what you're all going through is on top to feel guilty about it. Okay? Keep on fighting.
Well
said. It's been a true pleasure, and I hope to see you guys soon. Jessica, it was lovely to see you. I don't know if I can't hear you because this is not working, but it was really lovely.
I can hear you. I can hear you. That was perfect. It was lovely to see you, Hans. Thank you so much. Sorry, guys, about the tech issues there at the end, but I think you heard those parting words from Hans, which were just perfect. The importance of nobody guilting you, understanding your choices and being able to make informed decision. And ultimately, the ultimate parting message is that it's good news. There is a lot that you can actually do here with Mosaic. So thank you so much, everybody. Thank you to the European Fertility Society. Thank you to My IVF Answers. And I look forward to seeing you all in the next video.